I learned two things about New England winters the hard way. First, that a good snowplow driver is worth his weight in gold, and second, that some people would rather freeze than admit they were wrong. My name is Marcus Johnson, and I have lived in Ridgefield, Connecticut for the past 15 years. I bought my house back in 2011, long before the neighborhood got taken over by the Pine Valley Homeowners Association. Back then, it was just a collection of regular folks who waved to each other in the morning and helped shovel out elderly neighbors when the snow got bad. Things were simple. Things were good. Then the HOA arrived like a plague of locusts and pressed business casual. It started innocently enough. A few concerned residents wanted to maintain property values and ensure community standards. They held meetings at the local library, promising that dues would be minimal and rules would be reasonable. I should have seen the red flags when Patricia Caldwell stood up at that first meeting with a 3-ring binder containing 47 pages of proposed regulations. Patricia was 52 years old, had blonde highlights that looked like they cost more than my monthly grocery bill, and wore the kind of smile that made you check your wallet afterward. I voted against the HOA. So did a lot of my neighbors. But the vote passed anyway, because the new developments on the east side of Ridgefield had all been built with mandatory HOA membership, and those residents outnumbered those of us in the older sections. Within 6 months, Patricia had gotten herself elected as HOA president, and the nightmare began. First, it was mailbox regulations. Everyone needed matching black mailboxes with brass numbers. Then it was lawn height requirements, measured to the 1/4 inch. Then came the approved paint color list, the banned lawn ornament list, and the infamous holiday decoration guidelines that limited Christmas lights to white or clear bulbs only and forbade any inflatable decorations whatsoever. But I kept my head down and followed the rules, mostly because I ran a snow removal business and did not have time for petty neighborhood drama. Johnson's Snow Services had been my livelihood for 12 years, and I took pride in it. I had 3 trucks, 2 bobcats, and during the winter months, I employed 6 guys to help clear driveways, parking lots, and side streets all over Fairfield County. We worked brutal hours during storms, sometimes going 36 hours straight, fueled by coffee and the satisfaction of helping people get to work or the hospital or wherever they needed to go. My personal vehicle was a 2019 Ford F350 with a heavy-duty Fisher plow attached to the front. That truck was my baby. I kept it maintained better than most people maintain their marriages. Oil changes every 3,000 miles, tire rotations like clockwork, and during winter, I checked that plow blade before every storm like a pilot doing a pre-flight inspection. The truck stayed in my driveway. I had a 2-car garage, but my wife Emma kept her sedan in there along with all our storage, so the truck lived outside. It never bothered anyone. The driveway was long enough that the truck did not stick out into the street, and I kept it clean and professional looking, with my company logo on the doors. Then came the winter of 2025. Connecticut got hammered that year. We are talking storms every 4 or 5 days, each one dumping anywhere from 6 inches to 2 feet of snow. It was the kind of winter that made old-timers nod knowingly and mutter about the blizzard of '78. My business was booming, but I was exhausted. I would get maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep between storms, just enough to keep me functional. During one particularly brutal stretch in late January, we got hit with back-to-back storms. The first one dropped 18 inches on a Tuesday night. I was out from 6 in the evening until noon the next day, plowing out all my commercial contracts first, then hitting the residential customers. When I finally made it home at 2 in the afternoon, I was so tired I could barely see straight. I pulled into my driveway and left the truck running while I went inside to grab something to eat and change into dry clothes. The temperature was hovering around 15 degrees, and letting the truck idle for 20 minutes while I took care of myself was standard practice. Diesel engines hate the cold, and shutting it down just to restart it 20 minutes later was harder on the engine than letting it run. I made a sandwich, chugged a sports drink, and was pulling on fresh thermal underwear when my doorbell rang. I figured it was a neighbor needing help with something, so I threw on pants and a shirt and headed downstairs. Patricia Caldwell stood on my front porch, wrapped in a Canada Goose parka that probably cost $1,500, holding her phone up like she was filming a crime scene. "Marcus Johnson," she said, even though she knew exactly who I was. "Patricia, what can I do for you?" "I am documenting a violation of HOA Regulations Section 12.4, which prohibits excessive vehicle idling on residential properties." "Your truck has been running in your driveway for," she checked her phone, "16 minutes and 30 seconds. I stared at her. Behind her, my truck sat in the driveway, exhaust puffing into the cold air, snow still caked on the plow blade from the night's work. "Patricia, I just got home from plowing for 18 hours straight. I am grabbing food and changing clothes, then I am heading back out. There is another storm coming tonight. The regulation is clear. No vehicle may idle for more than 5 minutes on a residential property. It creates noise pollution and environmental concerns. It is a diesel truck. It is 15 degrees out. Shutting it down and restarting it is worse for the environment than letting it idle for 20 minutes. She smiled that smile. "The rules apply equally to everyone, Marcus. I am noting this as a first violation. You will receive a formal warning in the mail. Any subsequent violations will result in fines. You cannot be serious. Community standards exist for a reason." She lowered her phone. "Also, I noticed you parked that truck in your driveway again last night after midnight. The sound of the diesel engine woke me up. Section 18.7 requires that commercial vehicles be parked in enclosed garages or off-site storage facilities." My jaw clenched. "Patricia, I live here. This is my work truck. I have been parking it in this driveway for 15 years. The regulations have been in place for 4 years now. I have been lenient up until this point, but given the repeated disturbances, I will need to enforce compliance." "What disturbances?" "Name one person besides you who has complained about my truck." She tilted her head. "I am not at liberty to discuss other residents' complaints, but I can tell you that multiple concerns have been raised about the early morning and late night noise from your commercial vehicle." This was a lie. I knew it was a lie. My next-door neighbors, the Hendersons, had thanked me just last week for plowing out their driveway for free during the last storm. The Kowalskis across the street had given me a fruit basket for Christmas specifically, because I always cleared the street in front of their house, so their disabled son could access their wheelchair ramp. Nobody on this street had complained about my truck except Patricia, who lived 4 houses down and apparently had nothing better to do than monitor her neighbors with the intensity of a Cold War spy. "I will take your concerns under consideration," I said, which was diplomatic speak for go away. "See that you do. Have a pleasant afternoon, Marcus." She turned and walked back down my driveway, her boots crunching in the snow I had cleared earlier. I stood there in my doorway, cold air pouring into my house, watching her get into her pristine white BMW SUV that had probably never seen a scratch in its life. Then I went back inside, finished getting ready, and headed out for another 12-hour shift. The warning letter arrived 3 days later. It was printed on official HOA letterhead, and detailed my violation of Section 12.4, excessive vehicle idling. The letter informed me that any future violations would result in a $50 fine for the first offense, doubling for each subsequent offense. It also reminded me of Section 18.7 regarding commercial vehicles, and gave me 30 days to comply by removing my truck from the driveway during overnight hours. I called an emergency meeting with my wife that night. Emma worked as a nurse at Danbury Hospital, pulling 12-hour shifts that were just as brutal as mine during storm season. She was the practical one in our relationship, the one who actually read contracts before signing them and balanced the checkbook, and remembered to file our taxes on time. "Can they actually do this?" I asked, sliding the letter across the kitchen table. She read it carefully, her brown eyes scanning each line. After a moment, she sighed. "According to the HOA bylaws we agreed to, yes, they can regulate vehicle types and parking arrangements." I never agreed to any HOA bylaws. When we bought the house, we were not part of an HOA. But when the HOA formed and got approved by the majority vote, all properties within the designated boundaries got included. Remember that certified letter we got 4 years ago? The one that explained we could opt out within 60 days by selling our house and moving. I did remember. I had thrown it in the recycling bin and forgotten about it, because the idea of selling my house because of some busybody neighborhood organization was absurd. So what are my options? Emma set the letter down. Park the truck somewhere else overnight, or fight it and probably lose because you agreed to the bylaws by not opting out. Where am I supposed to park a commercial plow truck? There are no storage facilities around here that I can access at 3 in the morning when a storm hits. What about at your office? I do not have an office. I have a P.O. box and a cell phone. The truck is my office. She reached across the table and took my hand. I know this is frustrating, but maybe it is not worth the fight. You could rent a spot at that storage facility off Route 7. It is only 15 minutes away. 15 minutes does not sound like much until you are trying to respond to a midnight emergency call, and you have to drive 15 minutes just to get to your truck before you can drive to the emergency. In the snow removal business, response time is everything. Customers do not care why you are late. They just care that their driveway is still covered and they cannot get to work. But I loved my wife, and she was trying to help, so I nodded. Let me think about it. What I thought about, during the next week, was how much I hated Patricia Caldwell and her stupid HOA. The next storm hit on a Friday night. The Weather Service had been tracking it for days. One of those massive systems that was going to dump 2 feet of snow across all of Connecticut and half of New York. I prepped the truck Thursday evening, checked all the equipment, made sure the salt spreader was loaded and ready. My crew knew the drill. We had our route mapped out, our client list prioritized, and enough coffee and energy drinks to keep a small army awake. The snow started at 7 in the evening. By 9, we had 4 inches on the ground. By midnight, we had 14 inches, and it was still coming down like God had torn open a pillow factory in the clouds. I worked through the night. My route took me all over Ridgefield and into parts of Wilton and Reading. Shopping centers, medical offices, apartment complexes, and then the residential customers who paid premium rates for guaranteed service. I was running on automatic pilot, the kind of exhausted focus where your body keeps working but your brain has mostly checked out. At 6 in the morning, I finally headed home. The storm was tapering off. We had gotten 22 inches total, one of the biggest dumps of the season. My entire body ached. My hands were cramped from gripping the steering wheel. My eyes felt like someone had rubbed them with sandpaper. I pulled into my driveway, put the truck in park, and left it idling. I needed to go inside, take a hot shower, eat something, and sleep for at least 4 hours before I had to start making second pass runs for clients who needed additional clearing. I made it as far as my living room couch before I passed out, still wearing my boots and coat. The pounding on my door woke me up 90 minutes later. I staggered upright, disoriented, wondering if there was an emergency. Emma had already left for her shift at the hospital. I was alone in the house. I opened the door to find Patricia Caldwell, and this time she had brought reinforcements. A man in his 40s stood next to her, holding a clipboard. He wore khakis and a polo shirt under his winter jacket and had the kind of mustache that cops and middle managers grow when they want to look authoritative. "Marcus Johnson," the man said. "That is me. I am Derek Winters, HOA compliance officer. We have received a complaint about your vehicle idling in violation of community regulations. I am here to document the violation and issue a formal citation." I looked past them at my truck. It was still running. I checked my watch. It had been idling for an hour and 30 minutes. "I just got home from working all night," I said. "There was a major storm. I am a snow removal contractor." Patricia spoke up. "The regulations do not provide exemptions based on occupation or weather conditions. 5 minutes maximum idling time. You are in clear violation." Derek made notes on his clipboard. "This is your second documented violation. Per HOA regulations, that carries a $50 fine. Additionally, your truck is parked in your driveway overnight, which violates Section 18.7 regarding commercial vehicles. That is an additional $100 fine. Total penalty is $150, due within 30 days. You have got to be kidding me." The regulations are clearly stated in the bylaws all residents agreed to. Derek handed me a printed citation, official and laminated like a parking ticket. "You can pay online through the HOA portal or mail a check to the address listed. Failure to pay within 30 days will result in additional penalties and potential legal action." Patricia smiled. "We understand your work is important, Marcus, but rules exist for everyone's benefit. Perhaps you should consider relocating your business to a community with more appropriate zoning." That was when I felt something snap inside me, not in a dramatic way. More like a wire that had been pulled taut finally giving up and going slack. I looked at Patricia, at her smug expression and her designer clothes and her manicured nails, and I realized something important. She needed me a hell of a lot more than I needed her. "Understood," I said calmly. "I will make sure to comply with all HOA regulations going forward." Patricia looked momentarily surprised, like she had been expecting a fight. "Well, good. I am glad we could resolve this reasonably." I closed the door, walked to my truck, and shut it off. Then I went inside, set an alarm for 3 hours, and went to sleep. When I woke up, I made some phone calls. First, I called the storage facility off Route 7 and rented a parking spot for my truck. Then I called my crew and told them about the new staging location. Then I sat down with my client list and highlighted every single property that was inside the Pine Valley HOA boundaries. I had 43 residential customers in Pine Valley. Some were driveways I had been plowing for a decade. Some were elderly folks who could not shovel their own walks. Some were just busy families who would rather pay someone than spend 2 hours in the cold. I started making calls. The conversation went basically the same way each time. "Hi, this is Marcus from Johnson Snow Services. I wanted to let you know that I am going to have to discontinue service for your property. No, nothing you did wrong. It is just a business decision on my end. I can recommend some other contractors if you would like. I appreciate your business over the years." By the end of the afternoon, I had dropped all 43 Pine Valley residential customers. I also had a list of the HOA-owned properties within the development. These were the common areas, the community center, the playground and park, and most importantly, the private streets. Pine Valley was one of those developments where the HOA owned and maintained the internal streets. The main roads were town property and got plowed by the Ridgefield Public Works Department, but once you turned into the Pine Valley development, those streets belonged to the HOA. They were responsible for maintenance, repairs, and snow removal. For the past 3 years, the HOA had contracted with Johnson Snow Services to handle snow removal for those private streets. It was a good contract, worth about $15,000 per winter, and it covered roughly 2 miles of residential roads that serviced maybe 200 homes. I pulled up the contract on my computer and read through it carefully. It was a standard seasonal agreement, renewed each fall, with a termination clause that allowed either party to cancel with 30 days written notice. I drafted a cancellation letter, professional and polite. It thanked the HOA for their business, explained that I was restructuring my service area, and provided the required 30-day notice of termination. The letter was dated February 1st. 30 days would put us at March 3rd, right in the heart of late-season storm territory. I printed it out, signed it, and mailed it certified mail with return receipt requested. Then I sat back and waited. The receipt came back signed on February 4th. Patricia Caldwell herself had signed for it. I wondered if she had opened it yet, or if it was sitting in a pile of HOA paperwork waiting to be processed. I paid the $150 fine online, documenting the transaction with screenshots and a confirmation number. I moved my truck to the storage facility every night like a good little resident. And I kept working, plowing out my remaining customers all over Fairfield County, watching the winter storms roll through one after another. February is a mean month in Connecticut. It was like the weather knew something was coming and decided to load the dice. We got hit with 3 significant storms over the next 3 weeks, each one dumping between 8 and 15 inches. I was out working every time, and every time I drove through Pine Valley to access other parts of town, I saw the HOA plow contractor clearing those private streets. The contractor was a guy named Bob's Snowplow, a bigger outfit than mine with a fleet of trucks and equipment. They did good work, if a bit impersonal. Bob himself was probably 70 years old and mostly just managed things from his office while his crews did the actual plowing. I wondered if Patricia had read my cancellation letter yet. I wondered if she even cared. March arrived with temperatures that could not decide if winter was over or just taking a breather. Some days hit 45 degrees and sunny, melting the snowbanks into slush. Other days plunged back down to 20 with bitter winds that made your face hurt. On March 2nd, I got a phone call from an unknown number. I was at home, doing paperwork and maintenance on my equipment, enjoying the first storm-free week we had seen in a while. Johnson Snow Services, this is Marcus. Marcus, this is Bob Henderson from Bob's Snowplow. How are you doing? I knew Bob casually. We were not competitors so much as colleagues. The snow removal world in Fairfield County was small enough that most of us knew each other and occasionally helped out when someone got overwhelmed with work. Doing fine, Bob. What can I do for you? Well, I hate to ask, but I am in a bit of a bind. I am retiring. Finally convinced my wife that we should buy that condo in Florida and spend the rest of our lives somewhere warm. I am shutting down the business end of this month. Congratulations, man. That is great news. Thanks. But here is the thing. I've got contracts I need to hand off to someone reliable. Most of my commercial clients have already moved to other contractors, but I have still got this HOA contract in Ridgefield. Pine Valley HOA. You know it, I smiled. I am familiar with it. They are looking for someone to take over for the rest of the season. I told them I would reach out to some other contractors. You interested? It is decent money for not that much work. Actually, Bob, I just canceled my contract with Pine Valley HOA. I sent them notice last month. There was a pause on the other end. You canceled? Why would you do that? That is a solid contract. Creative differences with the management, Bob laughed. Say no more. I have dealt with Patricia Caldwell. That woman could start a fight in an empty room. Well, I appreciate your time anyway. Good luck in Florida, Bob. You earned it. Thanks, Marcus. Stay warm. I hung up and went back to my paperwork, humming to myself. March 3rd came and went. My contract with the Pine Valley HOA was officially terminated. I felt lighter somehow, like I had been carrying a weight I had not realized was there. The weather forecast for the second week of March showed a promising system developing. A late-season nor'easter was forming off the coast, the kind of storm that could dump significant snow if the temperatures stayed cold enough. The meteorologists were predicting anywhere from 12 to 20 inches for inland Connecticut, with the storm arriving on Thursday night and lasting through Friday afternoon. On Wednesday, my phone rang. Patricia Caldwell. I let it go to voicemail. She called back immediately. I let it go to voicemail again. Then she called from a different number. I answered that one. Marcus Johnson. Marcus, this is Patricia Caldwell from the Pine Valley HOA. We need to discuss a serious matter. What can I help you with, Patricia? I received a letter from you last month canceling our snow removal contract. I need you to know that this cancellation is not acceptable. We have an agreement. Had an agreement. I provided the required 30 days notice as specified in the termination clause. The contract ended on March 3rd. That is absurd. You cannot simply abandon your responsibilities in the middle of winter. The contract allows for termination with 30 days notice. I followed the proper procedure. We have a major storm coming this week. Who is going to plow our streets? That is not my problem anymore, Patricia. I would suggest contacting another contractor. There are several good ones in the area. Her voice went cold. This is retaliation for the fines we issued you. That is illegal. No, Patricia, it is business. I am restructuring my service area to focus on clients who appreciate my work and do not harass me about where I park my truck. You are welcome to file a complaint with whoever you like, but I fulfilled my contractual obligations and I am not coming back. You are going to regret this. Have a nice day, Patricia. I hung up. She called back 3 more times. I did not answer. Thursday afternoon, the snow started. This storm was even bigger than forecasted. By Thursday evening, we had 6 inches down and it was intensifying. The wind picked up, creating whiteout conditions and drifting that made roads impassable within hours. This was a genuine nor'easter, the kind that makes national news and shuts down entire cities. I was out working with my crew, hitting all our contracts in our usual priority order. Commercial properties first, then residential. We worked through the night, our trucks carving paths through the accumulating snow, our plows scraping, and our sanders spreading salt and grit on the treacherous surfaces. Around 3 in the morning, I drove through Pine Valley to access a cluster of residential customers in the neighboring subdivision. The main roads, maintained by the town, had been plowed recently. But the moment I turned onto Pine Valley Drive, the private HOA road, everything changed. The street was buried. We had probably 16 inches of snow by that point, and the wind had created drifts that were 2 feet high in places. No plow had touched these roads. No salt had been spread. It was a white wilderness right in the middle of a suburban development. I could see lights on in houses, could imagine residents looking out their windows at the buried streets, wondering when the plow would come. I drove slowly through the unplowed mess, my truck handling it fine with four-wheel drive and the heavy plow on the front, and continued on to my actual customers. By Friday afternoon, the storm had finally moved offshore. We had gotten 23 inches of snow, with drifts in some places reaching 4 feet. It was the kind of storm that old people would reference for years. The kind that made everyone share photos on social media and complain about their aching backs from all the shoveling. The town crews had been working nonstop. The main roads were all passable, down to bare pavement in most places. Businesses were digging out. Life was slowly returning to normal, but Pine Valley was trapped. I heard about it from Emma, who heard about it from a coworker whose sister lived in the development. The HOA streets were still completely unplowed. Some residents had managed to dig out their own driveways, only to find they could not go anywhere because the street in front of their house was impassable. Four-wheel drive SUVs were getting stuck. One guy had tried to leave for work and had ended up buried to his axles in a drift, blocking the road even further. Patricia had apparently been calling every snow removal contractor in Fairfield County. But here was the thing about major storms. Contractors were already stretched thin. Every plow truck in the state was working around the clock for existing customers. Nobody had spare equipment or manpower to take on a 2-mile development that needed emergency clearing. A few contractors had quoted her prices for emergency service. These were premium rates, the kind you charge when you have to pull crews off other jobs and work overtime. I heard she was looking at quotes between $5,000 and $8,000 for a single clearing. The HOA emergency fund apparently did not have that kind of money readily available. Patricia had tried to take out a short-term loan, but banks do not move quickly. She had tried to get Bob's Snow Pros to come back for one more job, but Bob was already in Florida, his equipment sold off. By Friday night, residents in Pine Valley were furious. The HOA Facebook page, which normally featured complaints about improper holiday decorations and requests to identify suspicious vehicles, was flooded with angry posts demanding to know why the streets were not plowed. People had missed work. A woman had gone into labor, and the ambulance had gotten stuck trying to reach her house. They had to evacuate her on foot, with EMTs and neighbors helping to carry her through waist-deep snow to the waiting ambulance on the plowed main road. I stayed away from all of it. I was home with Emma, enjoying a quiet weekend after the storm, catching up on sleep and maintenance. On Saturday morning, my doorbell rang. I was not surprised to see Patricia Caldwell standing there, looking significantly less put together than usual. Her hair was not quite right. Her jacket had snow on it. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Marcus, we need to talk." "I do not think we have anything to discuss, Patricia. Please, I am asking for your help. The HOA streets are impassable. We have 200 families trapped in their homes. I know we have had our differences, but people are suffering. You should have thought about that before you fined me for working. I was enforcing the rules. You are punishing an entire community because of a personal grudge. No, Patricia. I am running my business according to my own priorities. You made it clear that I was not welcome in Pine Valley. You harassed me, fined me, and tried to force me to relocate my truck. So I decided to take my services elsewhere. That is called capitalism. I will waive the fines. I will personally apologize for any inconvenience. Just please come plow our streets." "What is your offer?" she blinked. "What? You want me to drop everything and clear 2 miles of residential streets that are buried under 2 feet of snow. That is an emergency job. What are you willing to pay? Our standard contract was $6,000 for the whole winter. That was a seasonal rate for regular maintenance. This is emergency recovery work. My price is $7,000 half upfront before I move a single blade of snow. Her face went white. That is price gouging. No, that is the market rate for emergency snow removal after a major storm. You can call around and verify. In fact, I am cheaper than most because I am local and my equipment is already prepped. Take it or leave it. The HOA does not have that kind of money immediately accessible. Then I guess your streets stay buried until you figure it out. Now, if you will excuse me, I have other things to do. I closed the door. She stood there for a moment, then walked away. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Sunday morning, I woke up to find my truck at the storage facility had been vandalized. Someone had spray-painted "selfish" across the driver's side door in big red letters. They had also slashed 2 of my tires and poured something sticky, maybe soda, all over the windshield and hood. I called the police. A young officer named Henderson, no relation to my neighbors, came out to take a report. He photographed the damage, took my statement, and asked if I knew who might have done it. I have a pretty good idea, I said, and explained the situation with the HOA. Officer Henderson shook his head. That is rough, man, but without proof, I cannot do anything. File an insurance claim and we will keep this on record in case it happens again. The damage cost me $1,200 to fix, even with insurance. More importantly, it put one of my trucks out of commission for 3 days while the tires got replaced and the door got repainted. I started parking all my trucks at the storage facility, and I installed security cameras. Meanwhile, Pine Valley remained buried. The main roads leading into the development were clear, creating a stark boundary where civilization ended and the snow apocalypse began. People were getting creative. Some residents had banded together to shovel the streets manually, making narrow walking paths between houses. Others had hired private contractors to plow just their portion of the street, creating a patchwork of clear sections and buried sections that was almost worse than leaving it all unplowed. The HOA held an emergency meeting on Monday night. I was not invited, obviously, but Emma's coworker kept us updated. The meeting apparently dissolved into shouting matches and accusations. Some residents blamed Patricia for letting the contract with Bob's Snow Pros lapse. Others blamed the HOA board for not having adequate emergency funds. A few people apparently suggested that everyone chip in $50 each to hire emergency plowing. But that motion failed because people did not want to pay extra on top of their HOA dues. Patricia, cornered and desperate, made a decision that would end up being her downfall. She authorized the HOA to take out a short-term high-interest loan for $10,000, without a full board vote, without proper financial authorization. She just did it, signing documents and committing the HOA to a loan that none of the other board members knew about. She used $7,000 of those dollars to hire a contractor from New Haven, an hour away, who came in with a crew and spent 2 days clearing all the Pine Valley streets. By Wednesday afternoon, a full week after the storm, the development was finally passable. I thought that would be the end of it. The streets were clear. Everyone could go back to their lives. Patricia had solved the problem, even if it cost way more than it should have. But then residents started getting the news about the loan. The HOA budget was a matter of public record for all members, and when people saw that Patricia had authorized a $10,000 high-interest loan without board approval, they lost their minds. Emergency meetings were called. People demanded Patricia's resignation. The other board members claimed they had no idea she had taken out the loan. Financial records got subpoenaed. Someone discovered that this was not the first time Patricia had made unauthorized financial decisions. Over the past 2 years, she had apparently been approving expenses and issuing fines without proper board oversight, running the HOA like her personal fiefdom. The total amount of unauthorized spending was somewhere north of $40,000. That was when people started using words like embezzlement and fraud. I watched all of this unfold from a comfortable distance, getting updates from Emma, and from neighbors who were suddenly very chatty now that the HOA drama was public entertainment. In late March, Patricia Caldwell was formally removed as HOA president. The board voted unanimously to terminate her position and ban her from any future HOA leadership roles. But that was not enough for some residents. A group of homeowners filed a formal complaint with the Ridgefield Police Department, alleging financial impropriety and misuse of HOA funds. The investigation took a few weeks. I do not know all the details, but apparently, detectives went through years of HOA financial records, interviewing board members and residents, piecing together a pattern of unauthorized spending and misallocated funds. Patricia had been using HOA money to pay for things like community beautification projects that turned out to be landscaping for her own property. She had issued fines to residents she did not like, collecting the money into HOA accounts and then quietly transferring portions to cover personal expenses. It was not massive embezzlement. It was not hundreds of thousands of dollars. But it was steady, consistent theft over multiple years, adding up to somewhere around $60,000 that should have been in HOA accounts, but had somehow ended up in Patricia's pocket. On a Tuesday morning in mid-April, I was having coffee and reading news on my phone when I saw a local news alert. Former HOA president arrested on embezzlement charges. I clicked through to the article. There was a photo of Patricia being led out of her house in handcuffs, looking small and disheveled, nothing like the imperious woman who had stood on my porch demanding compliance with her regulations. She was charged with multiple counts of larceny and embezzlement. The article quoted the Ridgefield Police Department as saying the investigation was ongoing and additional charges might be filed. Bail was set at $50,000. I felt no satisfaction, no triumph, just a kind of tired sadness that things had gotten this far. Emma came downstairs, ready for her shift at the hospital. She saw me reading and looked over my shoulder. "Wow," she said quietly. "Yeah. Do you feel bad?" I thought about it. "I feel bad that it happened. I do not feel bad that she got caught. You did not make her steal from the HOA." "No, but if I had just kept plowing their streets, maybe none of this would have come to light." Emma kissed the top of my head. "Or maybe she would have kept stealing for another 5 years. You did not create this situation, Marcus. You just stopped enabling it." She was right, of course. Patricia had made her own choices. I had just declined to be complicit in a system that treated me like garbage. The legal process ground forward slowly. Patricia pleaded not guilty initially, claiming the financial irregularities were accounting errors and misunderstandings. But as more evidence came out during pre-trial hearings, her position became increasingly untenable. Bank records showed clear transfers from HOA accounts to her personal accounts. Receipts showed HOA money being spent on personal items. Testimony from other board members established that she had systematically hidden financial information and made decisions without oversight. In June, she changed her plea to guilty on 4 counts of larceny. The prosecutor recommended a sentence of 18 months in prison followed by probation, plus full restitution of the stolen funds. The judge gave her 2 years in prison, suspended after serving 9 months, followed by 5 years of probation. She was also ordered to repay $62,000 to the Pine Valley HOA, plus court costs and fees. By the time sentencing happened, Patricia had already lost almost everything. Her husband had filed for divorce. Her house was up for sale to cover legal fees and restitution. Her adult children, according to neighborhood gossip, were not speaking to her. I did not attend the sentencing hearing. It felt like rubbernecking at an accident. But I read the article in the local paper, saw the quote from the judge about how positions of trust carry serious responsibilities, and felt a sense of closure. The Pine Valley HOA underwent major reforms after Patricia's arrest. The entire board was replaced in a special election. New financial oversight procedures were put in place, requiring multiple approvals for any expenditure over $500. The bylaws were amended to limit the president's authority and increase transparency. The new HOA president, a retired accountant named Bill Chen who lived 2 streets over from me, reached out in July. He called my business line and left a polite voicemail asking if I would be willing to meet with him to discuss possibly resuming a snow removal contract for the upcoming winter. I called him back and we met for coffee at a diner on Route 35. Bill was in his 60s, soft-spoken, with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of calm demeanor you develop from spending 40 years dealing with numbers and audits. He shook my hand firmly. "Marcus, thanks for meeting with me. I know the HOA has not treated you well, and I want to start by apologizing for that. You were not president when all that happened." "No, but it happened under the HOA's authority, and that reflects on all of us. What Patricia did to you was petty and vindictive. The fines she issued were unreasonable. You had every right to walk away from your contract." I sipped my coffee. "I appreciate you saying that. The new board has been reviewing all the rules and regulations. We have eliminated a lot of the more restrictive ones, including the vehicle idling limit and the commercial vehicle parking ban. We are trying to make Pine Valley a community again, not a dictatorship." "That is good to hear. I wanted to ask if you would consider resuming snow removal services for our streets this winter. I understand if the answer is no, but I can promise you that we will honor the contract, pay on time, and not harass you about how you do your job." I leaned back in my chair. "What are you offering?" "Our previous seasonal rate was $6,000. I am authorized to offer you $8,000 for the upcoming season, with a provision for emergency premium rates if we get hit with major storms. All in writing, all approved by the full board. Make it $9,000 and we have a deal." Bill did not hesitate. "Done. I will have the contract drafted by our lawyer and sent to you next week." We shook hands. The contract arrived on schedule, I signed it, and when winter came again, I was back plowing the Pine Valley streets. Things were different now. The new board was reasonable. Residents waved when they saw my truck, sometimes coming out to thank me for clearing their streets. The atmosphere in the neighborhood had changed, like everyone had collectively decided to stop being terrible to each other. I never saw Patricia Caldwell again. She served her 9 months at a minimum security facility and was released on probation. According to the real estate records, her house sold and she moved out of state, probably to start over somewhere nobody knew her story. My business kept growing. I hired 2 more employees and bought another truck. Emma got a promotion at the hospital. We talked about maybe taking a vacation to someplace warm, like Bob Henderson and his wife, enjoying winter from a distance for once. On a February evening, almost a year after the storm that buried Pine Valley, I was sitting in my driveway in my truck, engine idling, eating a sandwich between plowing runs. It It was a small storm, only 6 inches forecasted, the kind that kept me busy but was not overwhelming. My neighbor, Jim Henderson, walked over with his snow shovel. He was clearing the end of his driveway where the town plow had pushed snow across. He saw me sitting there and waved. I rolled down my window. "How are you doing, Jim? Cannot complain." "Hey, thanks for clearing in front of the mailbox earlier. I saw you push that pile out of the way." "No problem." He leaned on his shovel. "You know, I never told you this, but back when Patricia was hassling you about your truck, she came around asking if any of us were bothered by the noise. I told her we loved having you on the street because you always help out when people need it. I appreciate that. She tried to get me to sign some kind of petition. I told her where she could stick it." He grinned. "Guess it worked out in the end though, huh?" "Guess it did." "Well, I will let you get back to work. Stay safe out there." "You too, Jim." He walked back to his driveway and I sat there for a moment, engine idling, heater running, thinking about how strange life was. A year ago, I had been angry and frustrated, ready to burn bridges and walk away from customers out of spite. Now things were better than ever, and all it had taken was standing my ground and letting the dominoes fall where they may. I finished my sandwich, put the truck in gear, and headed out for another round of plowing. The snow was still falling, soft and steady, covering the world in white. Somewhere out there, people needed their driveways cleared, their streets made passable, their lives made a little bit easier. And that was exactly what I was going to do. The rest of that winter passed without major incident. We got a few more storms, nothing too severe, and I worked my routes efficiently with my expanded crew. The Pine Valley contract went smoothly. Bill Chen ran the HOA with competence and fairness, traits that had apparently been absent during Patricia's reign. In March, I got a letter in the mail from the Connecticut State Attorney's Office. It was not a subpoena or anything scary, just a form letter thanking me for my cooperation during the investigation into Patricia Caldwell's financial crimes. The letter explained that my decision to cancel the HOA contract had been one of several factors that led residents to examine the HOA finances more closely, ultimately uncovering the embezzlement. The letter included a line that stuck with me. "Sometimes the most powerful thing a citizen can do is simply refuse to participate in a broken system." I showed it to Emma that evening. She read it and smiled. "Frame it," she said. "Why would I frame it?" "Because it is proof that doing the right thing matters, even when it is hard, even when people tell you that you are being unreasonable." So I framed it. It hangs in my home office now, right next to my business license and a photo of my first plow truck. Spring arrived, and with it, the end of snow season. I did the annual maintenance on all the trucks, replacing worn parts, touching up paint, preparing for another year. My crew dispersed to their off-season jobs. I shifted focus to my landscaping side business, which was smaller but kept money coming in during the warm months. Life moved on. I saw Bill Chen at the grocery store one day in May. We chatted briefly, and he mentioned that the HOA had established a reserve fund with proper oversight, ensuring they would never again be caught unable to pay for emergency services. "We are also planning to put up a plaque at the community center," he said, honoring the principle of accountability in community governance, naming it after the residents who pushed for reform after the embezzlement scandal. "That is a nice gesture. We wanted to include your name. You were a catalyst for change, even if it was not intentional." I shook my head. "I appreciate the thought, but no thanks. I just run a snow removal business. I am not looking to be anyone's hero." Bill nodded. "Fair enough. But know that a lot of people in Pine Valley are grateful for what you did, or did not do, I suppose." We parted ways, and I thought about his words as I drove home. I had not set out to be a hero or a reformer. I had just been a guy trying to do his job without getting harassed by a power-hungry HOA president. The fact that my small act of defiance had snowballed into justice and reform was not something I had planned, but maybe that was the point. Maybe the big changes in life do not come from grand gestures or elaborate plans. Maybe they come from regular people deciding they have had enough and drawing a line in the snow. Summer was quiet. Emma and I took that vacation we had been talking about, flying down to Key West for a week of sunshine and mojitos and absolutely zero snow. It was glorious. I got sunburned and ate too much seafood and forgot to check my phone for 3 entire days. When we got back, I had a voicemail from a reporter at the Hartford Courant. She was doing a feature story about HOA reform in Connecticut and had heard about the Pine Valley situation. She wanted to interview me. I called her back and politely declined. I do not have anything to say that has not already been said. The HOA made mistakes, they got caught, they fixed it. That is the whole story. The reporter, whose name was Jennifer, was persistent. But your decision to cancel your contract was what started people asking questions. Do not you think that is worth discussing? Not really. I made a business decision based on how I was being treated. That is it. Would you do it again? If you were in the same situation, I thought about that. Honestly, I hope I am never in that situation again. But yeah, I would do the same thing. Nobody should have to put up with being nickel and dimed and harassed just for trying to make a living. Can I quote you on that? If you have to write the story, then yes, you can quote me on that. The article ran 2 weeks later. It was actually pretty good, focusing on the broader issue of HOA overreach in Connecticut and how residents were pushing back against unreasonable rules. I was mentioned briefly, described as a local contractor whose refusal to accept unfair treatment helped expose a pattern of financial misconduct. Emma cut out the article and added it to the frame with the letter from the state attorney's office. Now it is a collection, she said. Fall arrived, and with it, the preparation for another winter season. I renewed contracts, hired back my crew, and serviced the equipment. The weather forecasts were predicting another active winter, possibly even worse than the previous year. I was ready for it. On the first significant snowfall of the season, a 10-inch storm in late November, I was out plowing before dawn. My route took me through Pine Valley, where the streets were empty and peaceful under the falling snow. I cleared the roads efficiently, my plow blade scraping against the asphalt, pushing white walls of snow to the sides. As I made the final pass down Pine Valley Drive, I saw a woman standing at the end of her driveway, wrapped in a bathrobe and holding a travel mug. She waved as I went past, and I waved back. It was a small moment, insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but it felt like a vindication of everything that had happened over the past 2 years. I was doing the job I loved, in a community that appreciated it, without anyone breathing down my neck about regulations and violations. That was all I had ever wanted. The winter of 2026 was indeed brutal. We got slammed with storm after storm, breaking snowfall records that had stood for decades. My crew and I worked around the clock, surviving on caffeine and adrenaline and the satisfaction of keeping roads clear and people safe. Pine Valley never had another problem with snow removal. Bill Chen ran the HOA with steady competence, and residents seemed to have learned their lesson about giving too much power to any one person. The reformed bylaws meant that major decisions required input from multiple board members, and often a vote from the general membership. I heard through the grapevine that Patricia Caldwell had moved to North Carolina, and was working as a receptionist at a dental office. She had declared bankruptcy to avoid full restitution of the embezzled funds, though she was still making small monthly payments as part of her probation agreement. Her ex-husband had remarried. Her adult children had changed their social media names to distance themselves from the scandal. I felt a twinge of sympathy for her, despite everything. She had destroyed her own life through greed and pettiness, and now she was paying a price that would follow her for years. But that sympathy did not extend to regret. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. Winter finally released its grip in late March. The snow melted, the temperatures climbed, and the world turned green again. I parked my plow truck for the season, cleaned and serviced all the equipment, and shifted back to landscaping work. On a warm April afternoon, I was mowing the lawn when a car pulled into my driveway. A young couple got out, probably in their late 20s, holding hands and looking around the neighborhood with the eager expressions of first-time home buyers. "Excuse me," the man called out. "Are you Marcus Johnson?" I shut off the mower. "That is me. We are thinking about buying a house in Pine Valley. The realtor mentioned you do snow removal in the area. Is that something we could hire you for?" "Sure. I have a contract with the HOA for the streets, and I take on residential driveways as well. If you end up buying here, just give me a call and we will set something up." The woman smiled. "That is great. We have heard really good things about the neighborhood. Apparently, there was some drama a few years ago, but everyone says it is a really nice community now." "It is," I said. "Good people, good neighborhood. You will like it here." They thanked me and drove off, probably heading to look at houses with their realtor. I watched them go, then started the mower again and went back to work. Good people, good neighborhood. That was the truth now, hard-won through conflict and consequence. Pine Valley had learned what happens when power goes unchecked and when communities forget that they are supposed to serve their members, not control them. And I had learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is stand your ground, even when it costs you, even when people tell you that you are being unreasonable. Because integrity is not about always being liked or always going along with the program. It is about knowing your worth and refusing to compromise it for anyone. The sun was warm on my shoulders as I guided the mower across my lawn, the smell of fresh-cut grass mixing with the scent of flowers blooming in Emma's garden beds. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear kids playing, their laughter carrying on the spring breeze. It was a good day, a good life, hard-earned and worth every fight. And when winter came again, I would be ready, my truck idling in the driveway for as long as I damn well needed it to, with nobody to tell me otherwise.